Family loyalty supposedly runs deep, yet my sister prioritized a late rent check over our bond. She tossed my trash bags onto freezing wet pavement, branding me a complete failure. 2 years later, acquiring her landlord's multi-million-dollar real estate firm felt incredibly satisfying. Here's her eviction notice. My older sister, Beatrice, had always been the golden child. She was a powerhouse PR executive in Seattle, dating a wealthy investment banker named Garrett, and living a life curated specifically for high society Instagram. I, on the other hand, was the quiet, nerdy younger sister. I was a software engineer, specifically working on predictive algorithmic models for a mid-sized tech startup called DataStream. We weren't incredibly close, but we were sisters. I always thought that meant something. I was wrong. It all fell apart in November of 2024. The tech sector took a brutal hit, and DataStream folded overnight. No warning, no parachute, just a locked office building and a generic email stating the company was filing for bankruptcy. My severance was non-existent. I had some savings, but my own lease was up, and Seattle rent was unforgiving. Panicked, I swallowed my pride and called Beatrice. "B, I need a massive favor," I had said, my voice trembling over the phone. "I lost my job. My lease ends next week. Can I please crash in your guest room for a couple of months while I interview? I can pay you $1,000 a month from my savings." She sighed that heavy, put-upon sigh she perfected when we were teenagers. "Chloe, you know Garrett and I host a lot of client dinners at my place. A roommate isn't really the vibe I'm going for right now." "I'll be invisible," I begged. "I promise." Reluctantly, she agreed. Beatrice lived in a stunning, 3-story luxury townhouse in the Queen Anne neighborhood. Floor-to-ceiling windows, imported Italian marble countertops, the works. It was managed by Pendleton Properties, an elite, old-money real estate firm that owned half the luxury rentals in the city. The rent was an eye-watering $6,800 a month, which Beatrice could easily afford. But she still gleefully took my $1,000 a month. For the first 2 months, I kept my promise. I was a ghost. I spent 12 hours a day at my laptop, sending out hundreds of applications. The job market was a graveyard. For every senior developer role, there were 2,000 applicants. My savings were bleeding out. The tension in the townhouse became suffocating. Beatrice treated me less like family and more like an embarrassing stain on her expensive rug. If Garrett came over, I was banished to my room. "Garrett's partners are coming over for a wine tasting tonight," Beatrice told me one Thursday. She was adjusting her designer earrings in the hallway mirror. "Stay upstairs. And for God's sake, don't leave your cheap instant coffee on the counter. It looks incredibly tacky." Month 3 hit, and the well ran completely dry. I had exactly $140 left in my checking account. When the first of the month arrived, I had to do the hardest thing I've ever done. I walked into the kitchen and told my sister I couldn't pay my share. Beatrice froze, her espresso cup hovering inches from her mouth. "Excuse me? I'm out of savings, B. I had 3 final round interviews last week. I'm bound to get an offer soon. I just need a grace period." 1 month. Her eyes went cold. It wasn't just annoyance. It was pure, unadulterated disdain. "Chloe, I am running a high-end PR firm, not a charity for failures. You sit around all day on your computer while I actually contribute to society." "I'm coding," I protested, tears stinging my eyes. "I'm building an analytics tool to bulk up my portfolio. I'm working, B." "You're playing on your laptop," she snapped. "If you can't pay, you can't stay. You have until Friday." I thought she was bluffing. I really did. I thought our parents, who passed away 5 years ago, would have haunted her for doing something so cruel. But Friday came. It was pouring rain, a classic, bone-chilling Seattle downpour. I had spent the entire day at a local library, trying to secure a freelance contract. When I got back to the townhouse at 7 p.m., my key didn't turn in the lock. I knocked. A minute later, the door swung open. Garrett stood there, swirling a glass of scotch, a smug, pitying smirk on his face. Behind him, Beatrice was dragging 3 heavy-duty black trash bags to the foyer. "B, what is this?" I asked, my voice cracking. "I told you, Chloe. Friday." She hauled the bags onto the covered porch. "Your clothes and your computer are in there. I kept the desk lamp. Consider it collateral for this month's utilities." "B, it's 40 degrees and pouring rain. Where am I supposed to go? I was openly crying now, standing on the welcome mat, shivering in a thin windbreaker. Maybe you should have thought of that before you decided to be a freeloader, she said, her voice completely devoid of empathy. You're really doing this? I'm your sister. Garrett stepped forward, stepping into the role of the protective alpha male. Time to go, Chloe. You're upsetting Beatrice. It's time to grow up and face the real world. With that, Beatrice pulled the heavy mahogany door shut. The lock clicked. The deadbolt slid into place. I stood on the porch for 20 minutes, listening to the muffled jazz music playing inside, watching the rain soak through the plastic of my trash bags. That was the exact moment the sister I knew died to me. In her place, a burning, terrifying sense of purpose was born. That night, I slept in the back seat of my 2011 Honda Civic in a brightly lit Walmart parking lot. The cold seeped through the windows, settling deep into my bones. I cried until my chest ached, hugging my laptop bag to my chest to keep it safe. But by sunrise, the tears stopped. They were replaced by a hyper-focused, quiet rage. Spite is a dangerous thing, but channeled correctly, it is the most powerful fuel on earth. For the next 6 months, my life was a relentless, grueling routine. I bought a $15 a month membership to a Planet Fitness to shower. I lived off ramen, peanut butter, and sheer willpower. But mostly, I lived at a 2-4-hour diner down in Sodo, nursing bottomless black coffees while the waitresses pretended not to notice I had been in the same booth for 9 hours. I wasn't just applying for jobs anymore. Beatrice's mocking words about me playing on my laptop echoed in my head on a loop. The analytics tool I had been building wasn't a toy. It was a highly sophisticated, AI-driven predictive modeling software designed for the commercial real estate sector. I called it AuraProp. It could analyze millions of data points, zoning laws, local economic shifts, foot traffic, gentrification trends, and maintenance decay to accurately predict property valuations and pinpoint mismanaged portfolios 5 years before human analysts could. I knew the code was flawless. I just needed someone to look at it. I swallowed my anxiety and reached out to David Henderson, an old college friend who was now a junior partner at a venture capital firm in Bellevue. I pitched him in the lobby of his building because I didn't have a suit to wear to a formal meeting. I opened my laptop on a glass coffee table and ran a simulation using live Seattle property data. David's jaw dropped. Chloe, this algorithm just identified a $12 million inefficiency in the downtown commercial sector that my firm's senior analysts completely missed last quarter. Did you build this alone? In my car mostly, I replied, deadpan. 2 weeks later, David got me in a room with Nathaniel Brooks, a notoriously ruthless but brilliant angel investor. Nathaniel didn't care that my clothes were worn or that I hadn't slept in a proper bed in months. He only cared about the math. And the math was a goldmine. Nathaniel led a $2.5 million seed round to get AuraProp off the ground. Suddenly, I wasn't homeless. I had an office. I had a team of developers. I had a salary, but I didn't change my lifestyle. I rented a tiny studio apartment, saved every penny, and worked 100-hour weeks. The next 18 months were a blur of hypergrowth. AuraProp became the darling of the proptech world. Our software was saving massive property management firms tens of millions in operational costs. We went through a Series A, then a Series B. My equity in the company made me a multi-millionaire on paper by the time I was 29. Then came the buyout. A massive international tech conglomerate wanted AuraProp for their enterprise suite. The acquisition deal was staggering, an 8-figure payout for my shares alone, plus a position on the advisory board. I signed the papers on a Tuesday. The money hit my accounts on Thursday. I sat in my new, spacious corner office, overlooking the Seattle skyline, sipping a glass of champagne alone. I was wealthy beyond my wildest dreams. I was secure. I had won. But when I looked out toward the Queen Anne neighborhood in the distance, that cold, familiar knot of spite tightened in my chest. I opened my laptop and bypassed my own company's software, doing some manual digging instead. I started looking into Pendleton Properties, the old money firm that owned Beatrice's townhouse. What I found was fascinating. Arthur Pendleton, the aging CEO, was a dinosaur. He had refused to adapt to modern property management software. His firm was drowning in operational debt, hemorrhaging cash due to terrible maintenance scheduling, high tenant turnover in his commercial spaces, and grossly mismanaged assets. Pendleton Properties was quietly bleeding to death behind closed doors. Arthur was desperately looking for a quiet buyout to save his family's legacy from public bankruptcy. I picked up my phone and called Nathaniel Brooks. Nathaniel, it's Chloe. I want to make an acquisition. Privately, outside of the tech conglomerate. You just cashed out, Chloe. Take a vacation to Bali. Nathaniel laughed. What do you want to buy? Pendleton Properties. There was a long pause on the line. Pendleton? They're a dinosaur, Chloe. They're carrying at least $20 million in debt. Their portfolio is ancient. Their portfolio includes 65 prime luxury residential units in Queen Anne, Ballard, and Capitol Hill, I countered. If we implement a stripped-down version of the Oraprop framework to automate their management and restructure their debt, that portfolio triples in yield within 3 years. I have the capital for a leveraged buyout. I want it. Nathaniel sighed, the sound of a shark smelling blood in the water. I'll make the calls. But why Pendleton, Chloe? It's so specific. Let's just say I have a personal interest in their tenant retention policies. The negotiations took 3 grueling months. Arthur Pendleton fought tooth and nail to keep control, but his creditors were breathing down his neck. Ultimately, my newly formed holding company, Aura Holdings LLC, absorbed Pendleton Properties. I assumed their debt, injected fresh capital for renovations, and took complete ownership of their residential assets. The day the ink dried, I took the master hard drive containing all tenant records into my office. I locked the door, pulled up the master ledger for the Queen Anne properties, and typed a name into the search bar. Gallagher. Beatrice. There it was. Unit 4B. Rent was now $7,200 a month. Her lease was currently on a month-to-month continuation, pending renewal at the end of the current term. I leaned back in my ergonomic leather chair, the glow of the monitor reflecting in my eyes. Beatrice had thrown me out into the rain because I couldn't afford a fraction of her lifestyle. She had told me I was a failure who played on a laptop. I picked up my desk phone and dialed the number for my newly acquired head of property management. Yes, Miss Gallagher. The manager answered promptly. Hi, Sarah. Pull up the file for Unit 4B in the Queen Anne development. Beatrice Gallagher. I have it right here. What would you like to do? I smiled, a slow, dangerous expression that felt entirely foreign to my face. I'm the new owner of this building, and I want her out. Sarah, my newly appointed head of property management, hesitated on the other end of the line. Miss Gallagher, I just want to clarify. Unit 4B is currently occupied by Beatrice Gallagher. Is there a relation? She's my sister, I said, my voice eerily calm. And she is currently on a month-to-month holdover, correct? Yes, ma'am. Actually, she and her co-applicant, Garrett Hughes, submitted a request just last week to lock in a new 2-year lease. They also submitted a list of demands for the renewal they want: the marble in the master bath polished, a new sub-zero refrigerator, and exclusive access to the south-facing rooftop cabana. Sarah cleared her throat, clearly annoyed by the tenant's audacity. They've been quite aggressive with the staff about it. I'm sure they have. Send their renewal application file to my inbox immediately. Right away. Within 60 seconds, the PDF hit my inbox. I opened it and began scanning the documents Beatrice and Garrett had submitted to prove their financial solvency. On paper, it looked like the same old story. 2 high-earning Seattle elites dominating their respective fields. Beatrice listed her PR firm's net revenue at a dazzling $1.2 million, and Garrett provided a letter of employment from Montgomery Capital, stating his base salary as a vice president was $350,000, plus bonuses. But I was an algorithmic data engineer. I built software that sniffed out financial discrepancies for a living. And looking closely at Garrett's employment letter, something didn't sit right. The letterhead was a slightly lower resolution than the body text, and the signature of the HR director looked like a digital stamp rather than wet ink. I leaned forward, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I didn't even need Oraprop for this, just a few basic public record searches and a subscription to a premium background check API. I ran Garrett Hughes. The results painted a spectacular picture of a sinking ship. Garrett wasn't a vice president at Montgomery Capital anymore. According to an SEC filing regarding a minor insider trading probe, Garrett had been quietly terminated 3 months ago. His credit score, once pristine, had plummeted to 580. He had 2 cars facing repossession and a staggering $140,000 in unsecured credit card debt. I ran Beatrice next. My sister's PR firm, the one she loved to boast about, had lost its 3 biggest clients over the last 2 quarters. There were 2 pending lawsuits against her LLC for unpaid vendor invoices, and she had taken out a predatory, high-interest merchant cash advance just to cover her firm's payroll. They were broke. The designer clothes, the wine tastings, the luxury townhouse, it was all a crumbling facade, a house of cards held together by arrogance and fraud. They were drowning, and they were trying to lock in a 2-year lease they couldn't possibly afford by faking their income documents. That was felony wire fraud. A dark, triumphant thrill washed over me. I didn't just have the power to evict her, I had the power to dismantle her entirely. I called Sarah back. Sarah, deny the renewal. Draft a standard 30-day notice to vacate, but don't mail it. Don't mail it? No. Call Beatrice and Garrett. Tell them that the building is under new ownership and the new managing director is requiring an in-person meeting to discuss their renewal and their list of demands. Tell them it's standard protocol for luxury units. Schedule it for tomorrow at 2 p.m. in the main boardroom here at corporate. Understood, Sarah said, sounding slightly intimidated. Who should I tell them they are meeting with? Just tell them they are meeting with the owner of Aura Holdings. The next 24 hours crawled by. I didn't sleep. I didn't want to. I spent the evening picking out my outfit. I didn't want to look flashy. I didn't need a Gucci belt or a Rolex to prove my worth. I wore a tailored, slate gray theory suit, a crisp white silk blouse, and minimalist heels. I looked sharp, professional, and completely untouchable. At 1:45 p.m. the next day, I sat at the head of the massive mahogany table in the Pendleton Properties boardroom. The room was intimidating by design walls of dark oak, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Puget Sound, and a sprawling table polished to a mirror finish. I had a single manila folder resting under my hands. At exactly 2:03 p.m., the heavy boardroom doors swung open. Beatrice walked in first, radiating an aggressive sense of entitlement. She was wearing a beige trench coat draped over her shoulders like a cape, oversized sunglasses pushed up into her hair, and carrying a Birkin bag that I now knew was purchased on credit she couldn't repay. Garrett trailed behind her, wearing a custom navy suit, checking his Rolex with an exaggerated sigh to show how valuable his time was. They didn't look at the head of the table immediately. Beatrice was busy complaining to the receptionist who had escorted them in. I still don't understand why we had to drive all the way downtown for a simple lease renewal, Beatrice snapped. Arthur Pendleton never made us jump through these hoops. You new management people are incredibly tedious. The owner will be with you right now, the receptionist said with a tight smile, stepping back and closing the doors behind them. The heavy thud of the doors latching seemed to echo in the room. Beatrice and Garrett turned toward the table. Beatrice's eyes landed on me. She froze. The irritation on her face melted into sheer, unadulterated confusion. Garrett actually took a step back, blinking as if his vision was failing him. "Chloe?" Beatrice whispered. I smiled. It didn't reach my eyes. "Hello, B. Garrett. Please, have a seat." Beatrice let out a harsh, uncomfortable laugh. She looked around the empty boardroom, as if expecting a hidden camera crew to pop out of the wood paneling. "What is this? Chloe, what are you doing here? Did you get a job as a secretary for the new owners? Because if you did, you should know I'm not in the mood for games." "No games, B," I said, gesturing to the leather chairs opposite me. "Sit down." Garrett stepped forward, his jaw tight. "Listen, Chloe, I don't know how you got past security, but Beatrice and I have a meeting with the head of Aura Holdings. We don't have time for a family reunion. We have a lease to negotiate." "You do have a meeting with the head of Aura Holdings," I said smoothly. I tapped the manila folder. "I'm the founder and CEO of Aura Holdings. I acquired Pendleton Properties on Tuesday, which means, as of 3 days ago, I own your building. I own your townhouse, and I am your landlord." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of silence that happens right after a car crash, before the screaming starts. Beatrice's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The color rapidly drained from her face, leaving her pale and sickly under the fluorescent lights. Garrett stared at me, his eyes darting to my tailored suit, the massive corner office visible through the glass walls behind me. And finally, the undeniable authority in my posture. "You're lying," Beatrice finally gasped, her voice trembling. "You're unemployed. You were living in your car." "I was," I agreed, leaning forward slightly. "For 6 months. Because you threw me into the freezing rain when I had absolutely nothing. But I spent those 6 months building an algorithmic property valuation software that revolutionized commercial real estate. I sold the patent for 8 figures. And with that money, I bought out Arthur Pendleton's entire sinking portfolio." I slid the manila folder across the polished wood. It stopped exactly an inch from Beatrice's trembling fingers. "Open it." Garrett reached for it first. He flipped it open. On top was the fraudulent employment letter he had submitted. Next to it was the background check, proving his termination, his credit score, and his mounting debts. What is this?" Garrett stammered, the arrogant banker persona evaporating instantly. "It's a federal crime, Garrett," I said, my tone ice cold. "Submitting forged income documents to secure a high-value real estate contract is wire fraud. Montgomery Capital fired you 3 months ago. You're entirely broke." Beatrice whipped her head to look at Garrett, her eyes wide with horror. "Garrett, what is she talking about? You got your bonus last week." "There was no bonus, B," I answered for him. I looked directly at my sister. "Just like there are no clients left at your PR firm. You're maxed out. You're drowning in debt. The two of you have been lying to everyone, including each other, to keep playing house in a $7,200 a month townhouse you can't afford." Beatrice shrank into her chair, her glamorous facade shattering into a million jagged pieces. The golden child, the perfect PR executive, was completely exposed. She looked at Garrett with disgust, realizing her wealthy anchor was actually a sinking stone. And Garrett looked at the floor, sweating profusely, realizing he was trapped. "So," I continued, clasping my hands together on the table, "here is how this is going to work. Underneath those financial reports is a formal, legally binding notice to vacate." Beatrice flipped frantically to the third page. She read the bold red letters at the top, tears finally spilling over her mascara and streaking down her cheeks. "Chloe, please," Beatrice choked out, her voice cracking. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a desperate, pathetic panic. "You can't do this. We have nowhere to go. My business is struggling. If my clients find out I've been evicted, I'll lose everything." "I am running a high-end property management firm, B," I said, repeating the exact words she had weaponized against me 2 years ago. "Not a charity for failures." She flinched as if I had struck her across the face. "I'm giving you 30 days by the book," I said, standing up from my chair. "Because unlike you, I follow the law. However, because you submitted fraudulent documents, I am immediately terminating your parking garage privileges, your gym access, and your rooftop access. If you aren't completely moved out by the 1st of the month, my lawyers will file an eviction on your permanent record and forward Garrett's forged documents to the district attorney." "Chloe, you're my sister," she sobbed, clutching her Birkin bag to her chest like a shield. "Blood is blood. Blood didn't keep me warm when I was sleeping in a Honda Civic in November," I replied, walking toward the boardroom door. I paused with my hand on the brass handle, looking back at the two broken, miserable people sitting at my table. "Maybe you should have thought of that before you decided to be a freeloader," I said softly. I opened the door and walked out, leaving them alone in the cavernous room. A month later, I stood on the sidewalk in Queen Anne, holding a cup of hot coffee, watching a discount moving company load the last of Beatrice's boxes into a rusted truck. Garrett wasn't with her. According to Sarah, they had a screaming match in the lobby 2 weeks ago, and Garrett had moved out on his own, fleeing his creditors. Beatrice was moving into a tiny, run-down studio apartment in the suburbs, her PR firm officially dissolved. She walked out the front doors, carrying a heavy-duty black trash bag full of hangers and miscellaneous junk. She looked exhausted, her hair messy, her designer clothes wrinkled. She saw me standing by my car. She stopped, her grip tightening on the garbage bag. For a second, I thought she might yell, or apologize, or beg. Instead, she just lowered her head, turned away, and dragged her garbage bag toward the moving truck in the drizzling Seattle rain. I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. I just took a sip of my coffee, turned around, and got into my car. The townhouse was already re-rented to a tech executive for $8,000 a month. The portfolio was thriving, and for the first time in my life, I was finally, truly, at peace. Sometimes, the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones who push you into the storm. But what my sister didn't realize is that I didn't just survive the storm, I learned how to control the weather. Success is the best revenge. And there's no better feeling than knowing you built your empire on the bricks they threw at you. If you loved this story of ultimate karma, hit that like button, share it with someone who loves a good comeback, and subscribe for more crazy real-life drama.